Imagine the heavy, rhythmic sound of snapping branches in the pitch black. You can't see it, but you can feel the heat of a massive, bulky silhouette moving with predatory grace through the thicket. It's watching you. When we think of the great North American ape man, our minds jump to grainy 1960s footage and reality TV monster hunters. We assume this phenomenon is an invention of modern pop culture. Long before the invention of modern portable cameras, the ancient legend was deeply rooted in the soil of the Pacific Northwest. These early accounts documented an acknowledged, terrifying reality of the wilderness. The creature represented a physical boundary that kept humanity at a very safe, very respectful distance. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, such as the Coast Salish, have held historical authority over this region for thousands of years. Their oral traditions tell of the skookums, the wild men of the woods. Some tribes described a supernatural protector known as Sasquatch, while others warned of towering stone giants possessing immense, bone-crushing strength. The strict geographical rule of these legends was that these creatures lived almost entirely in the high peaks. They occupied the untouched, in-between places where men purposefully refused to tread. That fragile peace relied entirely on humans respecting those geographic boundaries. So what happens when westward expansion forcefully drives thousands of settlers straight into these forbidden zones? By the 1800s, fur tappers and pioneers began aggressive campaigns into the emerald darkness of the Cascades and the Rockies. Almost immediately, the historical records fill with terrifying encounters. The deeper the pioneers pushed into the dense timber, the more intense the territorial pushback became. Explorers documented sudden, combative warnings. Trappers reported massive, hairy beings hurling heavy boulders down onto their camps under the cover of moonlight. These encounters proved the stone giants were actively defending a shrinking territory. The warnings were physical, violent, and meant to expel intruders. This frontier collision reached its violent climax in 1924, deep in a rugged gorge known as Ape Canyon. A group of miners reported a night-long coordinated siege on their small cabin by a troop of 7-foot-tall mountain devils. The miners described an assault that defied biology. The creatures hurled massive stones at the roof and battered the heavy log walls with a brute force that no known local wildlife could muster. Ape Canyon solidified the physical reality of the threat. The protector of the high peaks had fully materialized, fighting tooth and nail against the human expansion. As settlers eventually overwhelmed the Cascades, the violent, direct sieges began to fade. In their place, adventurers found quiet, haunting forensic evidence left behind in the mud. This diagram compares a large North American bear footprint to the massive 16-inch hominid tracks pioneers found. Notice the anatomy. The hominid track has a distinct 5-toe alignment and flat heel. A bear's clawed pad cannot leave this flat-footed impression, ruling out local predators. The supernatural guardian of indigenous legend was leaving heavy biological weight in the dirt. The myth possessed a very real physical anatomy. By the mid-20th century, the uncharted frontier vanished. Highways cut through the mountains, towns sprouted in the valleys, and the wild was systematically mapped. The creature survived the closing of the frontier by adapting. It retreated further into the deepest pockets of untouched timber, vanishing into the emerald silence. It left behind only snapped pine branches, massive tracks crossing logging roads, and a lingering shadow operating right on the extreme edges of human civilization. The ancient mystery didn't die with the frontier. It simply learned to hide, lying in wait in the deep brush, primed to step out of the darkness and right into the lens of a modern camera. A high-definition thermal camera dives low over a jagged mountain ridge. Down in the clearing, a massive heat signature is tearing through the brush at speeds no human could manage over that kind of terrain. In 1967, the world saw what looked like an impossible creature walking across a sandbar in Bluff Creek on a shaky 16mm reel. Today, we're tracking that same phenomenon using autonomous thermal optics, acoustic arrays, and environmental sampling. It brings up a glaring contradiction. We live in an era where satellites map our cities and our phones track our daily steps. Yet a massive, unclassified primate somehow continues to slip right through the cracks of our global surveillance net. If this were entirely isolated to Pacific Northwest folklore, the stories would likely fade. But instead, we see a remarkably consistent biological pattern showing up on the fringes of human civilization all over the planet. Look at the vast, arid expanses of the Australian outback. Here, locals have long documented encounters with the yowie, a relict hominid matching the physical profile of the American Sasquatch, surviving in an entirely different biome. Moved thousands of miles away to the high, glaciated peaks of the Russian Caucasus, and you find the Almasti. Again, the accounts describe a tall, hair-covered primate retreating into the highest, most inaccessible mountain passes. The structural similarities in these global accounts suggest a shared source. To determine if that source is biological or purely cultural, the investigation has had to look past the stories and toward the soil. Modern search teams are now looking for microscopic genetic signatures left behind in the environment. Labs pull environmental DNA, shed skin and hair from soil in sighting hotspots to build a genomic profile. Scientists run this through vast databases. If it doesn't match a bear, deer, or human, but registers under the primate branch, they've traced an unclassified species. A creature might be fast enough to dodge a camera, but it cannot move through an ecosystem without leaving a chemical receipt behind. Researchers are also dropping autonomous thermal camera traps into North America's most visually impenetrable environments, like the waterlogged cypress swamps of Florida. They also deploy remote acoustic recorders that capture low-frequency audio over long periods. These arrays frequently pick up deep, resonant screams and loud wood knocks, heavy impacts on tree trunks that large apes use to communicate across distances. All this evidence points toward a specific biological candidate. Many biologists hypothesize that what we are tracking is a surviving lineage of Gigantopithecus. This image shows a fossilized jawbone from that massive ape, known for its sheer physical scale and enormous molars. It vanished roughly 300,000 years ago. The search has transitioned into a biological investigation of a displaced evolutionary ancestor surviving just outside our periphery. We have accumulated decades of secondary data, thousands of documented footprints, unexplained thermal hits, acoustic recordings, and anomalous eDNA profiles. Yet the physical specimen itself remains missing. To understand how that's possible, look at the geographical reality of a sighting hotspot like the forests of British Columbia. In these deep, multi-layered zones of foliage and massive tree trunks, visibility drops to zero within 20 feet. A smart relict population could easily evade ground-level observation in this terrain. This map illustrates the difference between satellite photography and actual human presence. We might have pictures of the whole Earth from space, but human infrastructure is just a thin, web-like network laid over the surface. The areas between our roads are massive, solid blocks of unobserved wilderness. These vast, empty zones connect, forming continuous corridors across continents. A small, intelligent group of primates could theoretically use these routes to migrate year-round without crossing a paved highway. The fact that these tracks keep appearing right at the edge of our mapped world tells us something crucial. In an age where we assume our technology sees everything, the natural world still guards ancient biological secrets that we cannot completely conquer.